I'm Hiko, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube.
This video is brought to you by Gamersops, a delicious, sugar-free energy formula. I like this particular flavour, Dragon Fruit Punch. Reminds me of DDK, Dragon. I hope that after his dormant period, one day maybe he comes back to the world of commentary and analysis to spit hot fire. Fruit, because he's an exotic, sweet delight with his content and his light manner of broadcasting. And Punch, because, let's face it, it was probably a punch to the gut, the way that Riot and many others in the industry have done him dirty, despite the fact he's a very legit individual, clearly cares about the space and wants to contribute a lot. Now, if you want 10% off an order of Gamersops, you can use the code Thorin, Thorin, at gamersops.gg. So this is going to be a video of my series, Who Is, insert the name, where I try to inform the community, especially newer games that they work in, of the history of a legendary player, key figure, top name that they might be aware of. So DDK is a 34-year-old former pro, commentator, analyst, now general manager, general industry veteran. He is currently the general manager of 100 Thieves Valorant. That's right, I call it 100 Thieves because they write 100. I don't call it 100 Thieves because that doesn't make sense. How many 100? And yeah, basically that's the way I do it. So he was previously a commentator. You might know a bit about his background in CSGO if you're someone coming from Valorant, but he is a veteran figure spanning many titles, probably even some I didn't even include here because maybe I'm not even aware of them. So to find out who DDK is, you've got to go way back in time to when he was actually just a good player in Quake 3 Arena specifically. So way back, he was attending as a pro tournaments like CPL Singapore in 2006 as an 18-year-old or around that age. Couple of years later, he was on the circuit again, ESWC Masters Paris, ESWC. Look, he wasn't a top player or anything, but he was playing at the pro level and he had sponsorship and he had people flying him around the world. He represented the UK in the UK teams. I think he played Capture the Flag, maybe TDM as well. He wasn't an elite player, but he was a good player and he clearly is someone who had skills and a mind for the game. He also, I think, played a bit of Quake 4 when that was the big game, which would have been around that time, 2006, 2007. He was representing teams like Four Kings, Dignitas. Now, sure, Four Kings wasn't the legendary org it was many years before at this point in time. It was on its last legs. And Dignitas, yeah, Dignitas is sort of just getting going around this time. It wasn't the massive org it's become since. But in the history of UK esports, these are the two biggest organisations of all time. And he was a player for them. So it kind of shows you within the UK scene, in the games he was playing, mainly 1v1, Quake, etc., this was a top player, TDM, etc. Now, he also, because he just loves games, and particularly the Quake series, after his pro period, he'd always played games with it on the side, CSGO, Valorant, all the top games. He's always played them on the side to keep his skill level up and his knowledge of the game. He learns through playing as well, an intuitive feel as well as studying the game didactically. But I would also point out, this guy is such a competitor and loves the challenge and the curiosity that surrounds getting new information and learning something he doesn't know, that he even went back after being pro in Quake 3 and Quake 4 and played in Quake World, which, by the way, is a client modification of Quake 1, just Quake, the game that came out in like 1997 or something, was replaced by Quake 2, I think, a year or so later, and Quake 3 like 2 or 3 years later. So this is a game that by the time he's coming to this point in time, we're probably talking like, what, 2009, 2010 at this point in time. This game is years in the past and it is only played at this point in time, mainly by Europeans and particularly Scandinavians on amazing connections who have all played the game for 10, 15 years and are utter wizards at it and are basically impossible to beat at this game because of how much experience, how much knowledge they have about it, their connections, every single detail. And it's also an insanely hard game to play because when you play it, you don't use voice comms, at least in this era. Traditionally still some teams didn't, some did, and you would use these things called locations in the game. So as you're playing, you'd have this like text going in the world say, which you don't, well, not world say, teams say that you'd all be doing with binds, and this was to communicate everything in the game as you play. It's a game where there aren't like breaks in the round, you're alive and you're just fighting the whole time. So it's telling you like what items they have, where they are on the map, where they're going to, and you're just doing all this, and you're basically like doing two things, multitasking. It's akin to how in Brood War you're just microing and macroing the whole time and harassing and doing all the other things, and it's just so insane. So basically, he went back and played this super hard game and had to put in mad hours to get good at it. And believe it or not, at one point in time, he was playing in a TDM team in Div 1, which is the top division, unless I'm mistaken. I'm pretty sure it wasn't like a Div 0 back then, was it? I think it was Div 1. If it wasn't the top, it was the second division of basically the top level of Quake World. That shows you the dedication this guy has, that he isn't just put off by the fact that it's challenging and really hard. This is one of the hardest games of all time to be very good at. It's one of the original games, as it were. This is our Sumer, if you're talking historically, for the references, in sort of esports. This is a game that, to me, kicked off esports. That just shows you the sort of mind and drive he has. So when he came to CSGO, my native game, Counter-Strike, he wasn't from Counter-Strike traditionally, but I knew this guy's going to get up to level real quick. And in the early days, talking like 2013, 2014, Counter-Strike came out around like the summer to the autumn of 2012 in terms of the proper tournaments in an esports circuit. He was doing these online cups from Milan, where he lived, working for Pacy in Italy, from their studio. And what would happen was they were doing Quake 3 cups and Quake Live Cup, but it would be Quake Live at this point in time. And they were also starting to do CSGO as well, and they were doing online cups. And it wasn't until, I think, the next year in 2014 when they had the Face It Season 2 finals, the ones that people might remember, the Olaf Meister Krim's JW lineup of Fnatic. That was their first big tournament win that sparked, for what my money is, their era. So that was like a big LAN finals he got to do. It was also in Milan, in Italy. Aside from that, though, the early days in CSGO, he's grinding in that studio with Face It. That's basically who he is aligned with, he's married with. And Face It at the time is only doing the odd LAN, so he's having to really build his level up. But in 2015, he got a big invite to come, and I've been, by the way, during this time period, I flew out to Milan. I've done a bunch of these cups with him in Quake and in CS. Very different guy back then, but we'll get to that. So the next year, a very famous event has one of the games people often cite as maybe the best game ever, the semi-finals between Fnatic and NIP, a 3-mapper. It was MLG X Games Aspen Invitational. So we all flew, the talent that were invited, to Aspen, Colorado in January of 2015 at the X Games, the real X Games, right behind this tent where these matches and tournaments were going on. You were having people doing backflips on like snowboards and stuff. It was mental. And when we were there, we were doing this esports tournament, a Counter-Strike tournament, the one that was won by LDLC shortly before they changed to Envious, if people don't remember. And also, interestingly enough, Dignitas before they changed to TSM came third and beat Fnatic. He did this big event. This was another major event to do, but this time not for his company. After that, he got going on the circuit, and basically it was just ESL and DreamHack that weren't hiring him as a commentator. Star Series was hiring him. I was at all these events. Gfinity, the UK tournament series, was hiring him. He did Ace of Predator Masters, which was basically in CS, the first CS Summit-esque tournament, because spoiler, CS Summit copied the concept off the guy who made Ace of Predator Masters, called Home Story Cup in StarCraft 2, wasn't it? So it's actually the other way around. CS Summit copied Ace of Predator Masters of anything. But you know, where it's more of a fun vibe and more like analysis from pros, and you're just watching a bunch of team people play in that guy's house in Krefeld in Germany. Then also he did the World Championships, which was like a national tournament thing in CS, the one that we did in Serbia, where me and Richard have told the stories about how terrible it was. At this time, DreamHack and ESL weren't hiring him. He was doing like at DreamHack Summer, for example, he was just the interviewer. Like, he was actually the one who interviewed Get Right in that famous interview where Get Right says, like, yeah, who gives a shit what Thorin says or whatever, that everyone tries to link, even though they don't understand. He is literally a friend of mine. But okay, you know what fans are like. He did get to work at DreamHacks. This is a little loophole here, because remember, DreamHack Valencia was where the tournament was and the venue, but the tournament that was actually held there was Face It Stage 2, the one won by TSM over Cloud9. Then, later in the year, he was at DreamHack Winter 2015, but that was the one that was Face It Stage 3, won by Fnatic with Dennis over Luminosity. It was the first event with Luminosity having Taco, Zeus as their coach, FNX, and they came second in the tournament, amazingly. Now, at this point in time, the reason that's relevant is all the majors in history to this point in time have been run by ESL and DreamHack. So he's not getting on the majors at this point in his career. He's sort of sidelined, working off in his studio with Bardolph, who was more of, he wasn't actually from CS Bardolph as far as I know. He comes from like fighting games or something. And they were more, because they were in the studio, and especially doing late night and online games, they were more known as like a comedic duo. Like, I'd say mainly on the Bardolph side. DDK is someone who can go super deep. Essentially, his casting back then was more like podcast mode, if you know what Sponge made. It was a lot of like analysis, and he had time to draw it out and talk about things things during rounds. And he was a guy where he wasn't so concise, but he clearly had a lot to give. And he was really interested in the game. And in fact, if people don't know, he even used to play with some legendary Quake players in CSGO to keep his skills up, like Cypher and Faz and some of these guys. I won't name more names unless they want to be known. To play CS sometimes if you're a Quake player, by the way, sort of heresy in some ways. Then he got his gig on E-League, which was American TV. For people who don't know, that was on TBS, which was the #1 basic cable channel in America by views or something like that. And we were on a show called E-League, made by Turner Broadcasting, the same people who make Inside the NBA, hence that famous Shaq clip that I had, etc. So he was on American TV with me. We were on like once a week or something, on Friday night or something. Now, we were in the death slot, the graveyard slot, that everything dies in and just gets no views. So as a result, it didn't matter how the views did. But this was a big gig. Now, I will say, knowing behind the scenes, part of why he got in there instead of Henry and Sadikist, who would have been the next best duo after Anders Assembler, was because Faceit was the ones operating the tournaments, and there was a bit of finagling behind the scenes to get their guys in. Okay, fair enough. He got some more of a break, though. After this, DDK, well, just before this, actually, did get to work majors. And after that, he went on a mad streak working tons of majors. So towards the end of 2015, he worked the DreamHack Cluj poker event, the one won by Envious over Na'Vi in the final. Kenny S was the MVP. I thought Guardian was, but whatever. He got to work that one. Then the next major was MLG Columbus, which he worked in North America. Fantastic tournament, the one that was won by Luminosity Gaming over Na'Vi. Then he worked, let me think, ESL 1 Cologne, obviously. And that would have been the one that was won by SK Gaming, which was Luminosity Gaming, over Team Liquid most famously. Then he had E-League Atlanta 2017. I think these are all just in a row right now, which is the one won by Astralis, most famously over Virtus Pro. Then he went to PGL Krakow, which was the one won by Gambit over Immortals. Then he was at E-League Boston, of course, where it was Cloud9 winning over FaZe Clan. Then there was Faceit London, that is Faceit's own major, which was Astralis beating Na'Vi. Then he was at Starladder Berlin. Now, he did miss IM Katowice, you'll notice there. ESL didn't hire him for the majors after ESL won 2016, mainly because, I mean, part of it's because Bardolph said, like, this was an FPL, which is like a rival product to ESL's ESEA. Also, he did say, like, what up in this bitch? In the semi-final of a World Championship in front of Valve Software, etc. So ESL had their own reasons. Put it this way, Faceit and Bardolph didn't hire some of the people that worked with ESL, so it's kind of a bit fucking rich that they do complain. But I understand if you DDK, it sucks. Like, you are good enough. You haven't done anything personally. It's just your company's at war with ESL. Then he had the Starladder Berlin major, which was the last one we had before everyone went online, because of you know what. And then after that, when we came back offline, he did PGL Stockholm in whatever, September, October, November. I think it was September, October of 2021. Now, that one was a bit controversial. He actually got hired for, because he'd been off in Valorant and off doing like even Apex Legends and other stuff. And actually, at this point in time, he was very dedicated to Valorant. But they brought him back. Now, he did make a tiny little slip up. He did really early in like his first match call like the Deagle, the Scout, no, the Sheriff, or whatever the fuck it's called in Valorant, which is a bit embarrassing. But listen, he's DDK. Like, he actually is a legit guy. And as long as he put his hours there, I've no doubt he did a good job there. He did also get to cast 2 major finals on that run. So he did 9 majors by my count. He got to cast the Boston Major Final, obviously. That was one you might remember was a pretty epic game. And he got to do the Faceit Major one, because that was obviously Faceit's own tournament. It was actually a very rubbish final where Na'Vi just played like shit and Astralis just beat them fairly easily. Faceit at one point in time made their own product to try and really rival ESL Pro League. So instead of just being the Faceit League, they rebranded it to ECS. And it was what was the E even? Electronic Champion Series, Elite Champion Series, some bollocks like that. And it wasn't bad, but it was always shorter lands and smaller lands. And obviously DDK and them were the main people doing it all. He has some legendary calls in CSGO. Like, when this guy got his crack at the majors, man, did he make use of it. So you might remember some of these clips. 2 of them got graffitis, by the way, guys. You remember when coldzera did that amazing jumping no-scope AWP clip on Mirage against Team Liquid in the first map, where they were at map point for Liquid, and he had to do that crazy round to win the round for them? DDK's the one casting that. Then, at the next major, in the semi-finals, right, sure, he was just part of this. It was Bardolph casting it. But they were doing the semi-final at ESL 1 Cologne when Simple did the 1v2 no-scopes against Fnatic. He's there as part of that. And then he actually was the guy who made the winning call of Cloud9 winning the Boston Major against FaZe Clan, one of the biggest upsets of all time, one of the craziest endings to a major, the only major NA has ever won. After that, He basically worked with Flashpoint in 2020, but then they had the whole thing where things went online. He actually decided not to work with Flashpoint much at that point in time because he didn't want to come into a studio during that particular point in time. He started to focus on Valorant instead and swapped over, but we'll get to that later because there's some side stuff I've got to cover first before I get to some of the Valorant stuff that you might think you know, but maybe you don't know at all. In fact, you definitely know some things I know. So along the way, DDK never gave up on Quake. He still loved Quake. He would still follow Quake when he could because it was one of those games I could tell sustained sort of his spirit and his drive and what he loves about esports and what he's passionate about. And so during this time period of Counter-Strike we're talking about, he would still go and work as a commentator at QuakeCon. Like he was there at QuakeCon 2013 for some of the legendary ones. You might know the match that a lot of people in modern day, especially the noobs, it's like their favourite match ever, Rafa against Evil at QuakeCon 2016. He's commentating this game. He basically was the guy in terms of colour commentary in Quake after Too Good had gone to Dota and left and sort of become not as much of a public figure anymore, which is pretty legendary when you come from Quake 3 and Quake 4 and then Quake Live's come out. Like, that's the dream. Quake Live basically is Quake 3 if people don't know. That's why I love this guy. He always kept this passion for the game. He understood what I call the Robin Hood principle, which is that you go and you work in bigger games and apply your skill set and learn about that game and find what's cool about that game. But you take some of the money and the opportunity that affords you and you still work on the games you care about, like Quake, like Counter-Strike, whatever it might be. At one point in time when CSGO came out, I was tiny, but I was working League of Legends and StarCraft 2, and I would use the fact I could make a living there to put some content out in CSGO until the game actually ended up getting big enough that we could just do that full time. Then Quake Champions came out, and he was working with id Software again, through Bethesda or whatever. It's not really id Software at this point in time. He did QuakeCon 2017 in both Duel and Sacrifice, so you know he was practicing the game. In all these games, whether he would play it early on when it came out. He also did DreamHack Winter 2017 that year. This guy has always had an interest in the best esports games. I know at one point in history he was interested in StarCraft Brood War, the incredibly intense, super difficult. Basically, the Brood War is the Quake world of the StarCraft franchise, as it were, following the Korean scene. I think at one point even Dota 2 he was a bit interested in for a couple of years. I'm going to guess maybe like early 2010s. Apex Legends in 2019, he did a bunch of online stuff and actually got to work at another X Games Minneapolis, where he was partnered with, I think, Golden Boy. Apex Legends ain't my game. He's even worked in Diabotical, of course, with Too Good, who actually, interestingly, was sort of an enemy or a rival of his, but they sort of got along later, probably because they both just loved Quake and they grew up, both UK lads. In 2020, he was doing a bunch of tournaments and that, and playing in that. He also played in the game Warsaw, not Warsaw, Warsaw, which if you understand the play on words is Warsaw, is obviously a major city in Poland. And famously, there's a super hardcore Quake World-esque mod for Quake 3 called CPMA, Challenger Pro Mod, and that was mainly, for some reason, played primarily by Polish people, bizarrely, in LAN cafes. So they developed a super extreme version of Quake 3, and someone made like a different, separate independent game that took together some of those elements of Quake World and made it so hence it was Warsaw. Now DDK was playing around that and playing with people like Vu and all the rest of it. Like, this guy just loves games. He also, if you don't know, was early on in Overwatch. He was doing some of the online stuff for that Overwatch Open that A-League ended up having, but unfortunately they decided to go with Semler and Anders and I think Mr. X and a bunch of different people. They didn't bring DDK for some reason. I don't really know why. Again, he's had a pretty hard done by career. I would suspect part of it even is, I think Face It at one point in time was maybe acting as an agent of his, or maybe they charged a fee, or they said if he could or couldn't attend an event. There was a lot of fuckery behind the scenes. This isn't just a blow him up, kit small, smoke up your arsehole. I'm going to tell you some things about behind the scenes, but nothing fucked up. Don't worry about that. Then obviously we come to Valorant. By the way, there's a load more afterwards, but let's see if you know everything about him in Valorant. So one of the reasons he was able to get in on the ground floor of Valorant was when he wasn't attending Flashpoint 1 anymore, and he was in LA, and Sean Gers also was one of my analysts for Flashpoint 1. DDK was a commentator, but Sean Gers was an analyst. When they both decided not to come into the studio, they started doing a podcast called Immortal Minds. You might know about it. It was probably the best podcast for a while, right? And they started doing it so they'd learn the game and they could set themselves up to be commentators, to be a duo, to be analysts, to do all the things in the game they wanted to do. And they really committed to this game when it was tiny, when it was the beta, when people were just fucking around in it. But they already understood this is going to be big. So then when at Flashpoint we had a tournament in it that I nicknamed Pop Flash, pretty good name, right? If you know CSGO. He was one of the people working that. Then he worked the first Strike NA tournament the same year. Then VCT came along and he was working it all. He was in Challengers NA Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3. He went to Stage 2 Masters Reykjavik. He was at the last chance qualifier. He was at Champions for 2021. Then in 2022, this year, he was at VCT NA Stage 1. He was doing VCT Game Changers. But then what happened was he wasn't hired beyond that. There was some issues behind the scenes. He was getting pushed out or blacklisted or fucked with. I've heard also there was something like, I mean, you'll understand later. At this point, maybe he was trying to ask for too much from Riot, or maybe he wanted the rate to be high or something like that. These are things I've heard from legitimate sources. We addressed a lot of what happened with him and Sean Gers being removed or getting forced out sort of on the Four Horsemen episode. You can go watch a lot there. What I'll say is this: I think Riot are utter fools in terms of driving people's prices down and making them insecure and fucking with people's minds, which has always been Riot's fucking side gig, by the way, and one of their main preoccupations in how they treat people. They also didn't want people to be able to have a duo and to be able to have power and leverage over them and have their own figures that don't work purely for Riot Games, because Riot is a fucked up company if you don't understand. What's pathetic is this, though. They could have had Sean Gers and DDK as like the tasteless and artosis of Valorant. That's not even that good an analogy in terms of they might have even been better. Like, look, it's hard to match the charisma of Tasteless. But except for Brood War, Tasteless, I don't think, ever put in the proper hours to be a master or a super brain for StarCraft 2. It was mainly Artosis carrying him on that. Yeah, I said it. And I've said it to these guys' faces. And you know what? Some of them are cool guys and they can take it. But here's the thing. These guys, Sean Gers and DDK, they had the talent where easily they could have been the best ever, like double analyst, one does some collar. They could have been the best, maybe casting duo ever. But instead of having that as the face of your game, as usual, Riot went, what's that? Is there like a golden goose there laying eggs? Chop its head off, get like a shitty normal goose and tell that to start laying golden eggs, because that's how Riot Games views things. Remember, this is the same company where Mark Merrill told I Will Dominate, someone who's created like thousands of hours of content, celebrated his game, keeps it relevant. He tells this guy, like, yeah, well, you know, you're welcome for having a game and a career in a game we made for free. Or something fucked up. Because that's how game devs think. They think it's their world and everything belongs to them. What's yours is theirs and what's theirs is theirs. Fuck that. So then, because of this, fair enough, he didn't take it lying down. He quit casting and he became the general manager of 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves, Nade Shot. I've even told it to your face, homie. That name is fucking ass. 100 Thieves. Say it with me. Now, on the 22nd of March, he was announced as the general manager of 100 Thieves. I don't know, I assume he was involved. He hired Sean Gers as the coach of the team. The team changed a few players over the next months. They qualified for VCTC Stage 2 challenges, but they only finished 56th there, so they didn't make it to Masters. They won the last chance qualifier, which was a big deal, with a lot of teams gone in for that. Got to go to Champions 2022, so he got there in the end anyway, didn't he, Riot? But they only finished 9th to 12th, unfortunately, with like the fairly newer sort of roster of players, not the biggest names in the world. They managed to beat Fnatic, who was obviously a big team with some skilled players, 2-1 in the group, but then they lost to DRX, who ended up having a great run, the Korean team, and then they lost in the rematch to Fnatic and didn't get out of the group. Now, DDK hasn't just casted and played and been all over. Notice the guy, I said he's 34, it sounds like he's 54, right, with all the things he's done. Oh, he's been doing loads of other stuff on the side as well. He's made loads of content. This is a guy where you can go on YouTube and go watch episodes of DDK Talks Esports, as he has this podcast where he brings people in, and it's sort of like an educational Joe Rogan, trying to get into what they're doing and how they see the game and their perceptions, and then little tangent siding. It's a really cool vibe. There's the DDK show, which I think was the later name for that, or maybe it was the way before. Whichever one it was, a similar concept, bringing on people for interviews, a bit of topical things, a bit of historical things, a bit of abstract things, a bit of game theory and meta-driven stuff, because that's what DDK cares about. When he's done his content, it has been self-driven. He isn't a guy that's like, if you pay me this much, I'll do it. Like, oh, you want to hire me to... No, he just makes the shit he thinks is cool in the world around his own interests. Go to his channel. It's full of fire and so many years of amazing pieces of content. And his style is so unique. Like, first of all, it's always around, you might know this when I make fun of the way we would cast, it would all be around information players and the fog of war and like sort of like information burden and understanding what you can do by process of elimination and map awareness and understanding how to control certain areas and what the dynamics that teams have are and the protocols of when you attack a site or you hold a site or how you rotate in together. He wanted to know everything. Basically, he has the mind of a coach and is someone who's driven to know about these things. He loves to talk conceptually. Like I did a grilled interview with him, which is my old series before 4 Reflections, where people are even wondering, like, okay, I know DDK, but like, why is he getting like a long interview? 'Cause he's not some top pro. When you watch it, you'll see it's one of the most out there conversations I ever had in that series. Barely any of it's just nuts and bolts about the game, is it? Then obviously he loves to do analysis with an educational bent to it. So in Quake Live, he would be explaining even how you analyze a 1v1 duel game. In Quake World, he explains super complicated concepts like the DM3 spawns and how that affects a TDM game. In Valorant, he's done stuff like his interview with Vanity, where he explores all the different aspects of leadership and what Valorant's like and how you lead a team and what you do in the game and some of the aspects of the meta. This is a guy, and I must stress this, who is an autodidact. He is someone who can teach himself. In fact, that appears to be the best way he learns. I won't speculate on the way his brain might work or his background, but I do get the sense he was a very nerdy guy. I've known this guy for a long, long time, well over a decade, probably more like 15 years at this point in time. And if you don't know this, you might think now he's a little bit nerdy and a little bit quirky and a little bit exotic and quaint, right? This guy has leveled up so much, you will never know it. If I could make a movie about his life or a documentary and show you who he was and his background and who he was as a kid at school and then who he was in gaming as a player, and then this quiet little guy who should be sipping a beer, and then this guy who started to learn things. How do you talk to women? How do I improve my presentation? Working out in the gym and being fit, speaking. But there was also a guy who was like a gymnast and an athlete and working out hard. He's the kind of guy who for fun's like, oh, I'm trying to get back to like an okay level. Then he'll be doing those like rings that you pull up that are like take inhuman strength and ability to do. Oh, this guy's amazing. The only thing is, though, even some of these elements would sometimes spin into what were perceived as weaknesses. Oh, he's too verbose, isn't he? He can't get to the point. Oh, he's trying to set something up. There's a big point we need to be concise. Perfect content for a side channel. Perfect content for a podcast. Perfect content for if you're a coach or if you're GM. This is a guy who just loves and breathes esports. Like, all you need to know who DDK is this. I went back to an old AMA he did, and a guy says, because it took him a few days to answer it, he goes, did you forget you started an AMA? And DDK just answers and he says, I grossly underestimated the response and only put aside 5 to 6 hours to answer the questions. I'm going through everything as I have the time to do so everyone who put in time into asking questions receives a response. That's who he is. He really thinks everyone's owed a response, that he thoughtfully really sits down and thinks about, what do I think about? Who would be my favourite players? If you know AMAs, most infamously, notoriously, pros say they'll do it. They spend like an hour. They give like one-word answers. Like, who's your favourite player? Forrest. Just a good player. Might not even say just a good player. They just give the shittiest answer ever. This guy thought it's like he was doing like an actual like one-on-one with his fans. It was really important. The only thing is, though, a lot of people have taken advantage of this guy. Maybe not as much now, but in his career. Like in the industry, I think some of his issues did come from Faceit and Bardolph. Faceit was always trying to be at war with ESL and try and do Game of Thrones shit. So then no wonder he's not getting hired by ESL at some points in time. Then you had the whole thing where, because he's with Bardolph, who I'll always stress, was the guy making the hiring decisions for Faceit and ECS. So therefore he's fucking over other people in the industry or being biased against them or keeping them out and gatekeeping them or saying, I think this guy's not even good, not hiring them, big casters for other companies. Then obviously, you know what? People are going to get revenge on you and Faceit and Bardolph, and that's going to spill over on a DDK, and that was brutal. And my issue is this, and I'll say it right now, I've worked with Faceit, I've known the Faceit guys, I've known Bardolph, I've known DDK, but I'll just say it straight up, because this needs to be said. Those guys got DDK at the beginning of the Faceit time at a very vulnerable time in his life and his career that I won't say too much about. And basically, they did help him out and they did help him get a career and they did build him up as a star and build him, use him on their projects. But they also played on a lot of his insecurities. And they did a lot of things that I think, like, look, a company will do to you, because companies are evil entities that care only about profit, right? And certain individuals might just be, let's fit social climbers who just want clout and power of their own. But I think they used, like a lot of these TOs do, they used the angle of like, we're friends and the friend card and loyalty stuff just to their own benefit and never to benefit DDK's factor. It took this guy years to get the kind of money he should have been on. He used to be just on a salary when the rest of us were making, like, let's just say between 5 and sometimes 6,000, 6 figures. That's not even true. No, 4 and 5 figures a month. And this guy would be on like low 4 figures. Some of us were making 10 plus K a month. And he was doing the same events and just getting a bit of that. So I always thought that was mad fucked up. I tried to counsel him many, many times. Sometimes he'd listen. He wasn't always as confident back then. Let's just say that. I also think, I'll just be very careful how I say this, I think later in his career, it's one of the reasons actually we sort of parted ways professionally and personally. There were other influences I also think sometimes potentially cost him opportunities or pushed him in the wrong direction. Maybe they also were things that benefited him too. Seems like he's in a very happy place in his life. I would certainly hope so. One thing I think's interesting was, I saw in this AMA way back then, someone asked him basically about casting, and he said this line here, and I think this is so telling for who he was in the industry. He said, I think the thing that affects me the most is the lack of security and general uncertainty as a whole. I have no idea if this will be a lasting career, if the market value will go up or down, or if I will remain popular enough to be comfortable. I hope this is someone who can always be popular enough or have the security, have the market value to be comfortable, to do what he loves, to explore his passions, because he is a legend. This is a guy who, if you go on commentators and people who contribute to esports, he should be in a Hall of Fame. It's not even a question. It would be a unanimous vote if you know the industry. Most of those Hall of Fames are just playing God and politics and all sorts of bullshit optics. This guy would be in my Hall of Fame for talent, without a doubt. This is a guy who did so much for the industry and continues to do now behind the scenes, working with younger players, building this team for 100 Thieves. So this is just a guy we want to celebrate. And he's a lot more than just a guy in Valorant as a general manager or a guy, didn't he do like a bunch of commentary in CSGO? Like, wasn't he a bit of a meme? No, he's a fucking legend. This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Hades GOUD, Kai L, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Jensen Goh, Kovacevicd, Pacy, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Thooorin, and as always, special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest? Would you like to ask a question for my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers on who's going to be the upcoming interview subjects in my content? Do you want to take part in one of those long discussions with me about anything in esports? Well, if so, all of the above perks are available if you put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.